Everyone is talking about negotiations, but under the surface, confrontation with Iran is inevitable. And we know this because Iran has doubled missile production, as in making threats, like saying that not a single American anywhere in the world will be safe, and otherwise threatening to set the Middle East on fire in response to an attack. President Trump responded to Supreme Leader Khamenei's latest threats by saying, "A regional war without a deal, we'll find out if you were right." Iran has also sent a message to the Gulf states, which are putting heavy pressure on the Americans to hold their fire for now, that United States talks with Iran will begin in the coming days with senior officials from both countries. But we should ask, do the chants of death to America in Tehran in the parliament the day before yesterday indicate that they are seeking peace? In any case, against the backdrop of tensions with Iran, the White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will arrive in Israel this week. Are we heading towards an unprecedented attack or another round of diplomacy? Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And right now, the whole truth about what is happening in the Middle East. And speaking of which, we look around and see an aircraft carrier, 8 destroyers, 2 submarines, dozens of attack aircrafts and defensive systems, and a president who still hasn't made his decision clear to everyone. However, the president has responded to Iran's leader Khamenei, who threatened that an American attack would ignite a regional war by saying that, "I hope we reach a deal. If not, we'll find out whether he was right or not." That doesn't sound like President Trump takes the possibility of a regional war very seriously, and even if he does, he doesn't seem to be worried about it. For their part, Tehran has taken some conciliatory steps, such as canceling missile drills in the Strait of Hormuz and releasing some prisoners. However, Iran's foreign minister said there is an opportunity for a nuclear agreement. On the missiles, we will not compromise. Meanwhile, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir was in Washington recently for talks aimed at strategic coordination with the United States ahead of a possibility that the IDF could join an attack against Iran. The meeting included sharing of sensitive intelligence and preparations to defend against a missile attack, as well as the assessment that the negotiations will not yield an agreement. I think we can assume that they also discussed whether the chants of death to America in Tehran's parliament indicate that senior figures in Iran's Revolutionary Guards understand that the die has been cast. After General Zamir's visit to the United States and the agreement to continue coordination between the two countries around a possible U.S. strike in the Islamic Republic of Iran, President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff will arrive for a visit in Israel and will meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and senior defense officials. Witkoff and Tehran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are also expected to hold talks in the coming days, probably in Turkey. Meanwhile, Iran summoned the ambassadors of the European Union in protest over the fact that the Revolutionary Guards were declared a terrorist organization. I guess that they didn't like that and have no sympathy for them. And in Gaza, Phase B of the ceasefire plan is getting on its way, but Israel remains on high alert and demands that Hamas disarm after the American pressure and Israel's dictation to the release of the last hostage led to the opening of the border crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. That's right, about a year and a half after the crossing between Gaza and Egypt was destroyed when it was taken over by the IDF, after the Hamas terrorist organization smuggled weapons underneath it, the complex has reopened as part of the ceasefire agreement with Hamas. On the Gazan side, passport inspection rooms were opened before the crossing, and the IDF will supervise only from a distance the workers at the crossings from the Palestinian authorities and are under the European Union supervision, and we will show you what it will look like. And in related stories, over these recent weeks, advanced contacts have been taking place between Israel and the United States and the United Arab Emirates, within which the Emiratis seek to receive control of the civil logistical management in Gaza. So, We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 851 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region taking their orders from the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we start, I want to call on you to spread the truth, especially now when the entire Middle East is tense and it is becoming crystal clear who the evil is that spreads lies and hatred against Israel. So this is the time to fight it with the truth and share our content with as many people as possible. Now, to begin, the carrier battle group centered on the USS Abraham Lincoln is already in the area, and several more missile destroyers and submarines are on its way. At the same time, additional strikes and options and air defensive systems are being deployed at bases across the Middle East. And that matters now because behind the talks about negotiations, the confrontation with Iran is ultimately just a question of a decision by President Trump. In recent days, the tensions has climbed to a new level on two fronts in parallel, including the American naval front and the Iranian political front. On one side, President Trump is projecting force, while Tehran is signaling we are ready, but also making a threat that no American will be safe. Iran's chief of staff, Abdulrahman Mousavi, also declared this week that if there is an attack against Iran, the fire in this region will burn America and its allies. Now, let's put this in order by timeline and also operational logic. The starting point is the 12-day war last June, when Iranian capabilities were hit, but they did not disappear. Intelligence assessments indicate that vital components of the missile program were not completely destroyed, and some capabilities have been restored since then. And that is exactly what worries the Gulf states. They are warning that the Iranians and their arsenal is still capable of causing significant damage to American assets in this region, not only bases, but also infrastructure, the economy, shipping lanes, and any area where American forces are present. Iran has signaled to the American allies in this Middle East region that if it is attacked, this time the response will not be measured and it will not come with advance warning. There is fresh memory of the previous response at the American base in Qatar after Operation Midnight Hammer last June. Then, according to reports, the Iranian attack was more cautious and symbolic, but Tehran is now signaling that this time it won't be like that. And on that note, a former Iranian diplomat claimed that the regime has doubled missile production since the 12-day war and made significant progress repairing launchers that were damaged. He also added a detail that connects to operational thinking that some of the launchers were moved to mountainous areas that are harder to reach from the air. The meaning on the ground is simple. Even if there is a strike capability, not every launcher is an easy target. Furthermore, according to assessments coming from this region, Iran still has shorter-range weapons, launchers, and parts of the missile production system, and these are the capabilities that endanger the Persian Gulf, and the more than 10 American bases are in this area with tens of thousands of soldiers stationed in them who are with the operational range of these lesser systems. Therefore, the American move is twofold. On one hand, concentrating offensive power at sea, while on the other hand, adding an additional layer of defense. The United States military is an ongoing deployment of the systems that are like THAAD, anti-rocket defensive systems, and Patriot batteries at bases in the Middle East, including Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Also, the destroyers arriving in the area are also capable of intercepting aerial threats. In other words, Washington is not only threatening, it is building an umbrella, so that in the event of an Iranian response, no one will be left exposed. And then comes the direct clash between Trump and Khamenei. Khamenei has warned that an American attack will ignite a regional war, and Trump answered in typical fashion saying, "I hope we make a deal. If we don't make a deal, we'll find out if he's right or not," while noting that some of the assets he has already deployed in this region are standing ready. This is wording that keeps two possibilities open in the same sentence: diplomacy or a strike. But Tehran is also playing on two channels at the same time. On one side, after the European declaration of them as a terrorist organization, the Parliament of the Revolutionary Guards convened, and the entire parliament shouted together in a way that shook the hall with cries of death to America and death to Israel. On the other side, the spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry, Ismail Baghaei, posted statements to the effect that Tehran is examining various diplomatic processes, does not accept an ultimatum, and hopes for results in the coming days. He also says that different points have already been exchanged through regional mediators, meaning they are not closing the door. They are just demanding that you enter through their corridor. And inside this corridor, one name comes in and carries significant weight this week: Steve Witkoff. According to report, Witkoff is expected to arrive in Israel and meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and with senior defensive officials this week, and at the same time, there are reports about the possibility of talks in the coming days between Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, with the possibility also being raised that the meeting will take place in Turkey. This is an important detail because it connects the two worlds. While the Armada is approaching, the sides are still trying to create a channel that prevents the final step that is being taken. So, what is the official Iranian position in substance? Araghchi says that is an opportunity. There is an opportunity for an agreement that ensures there will be no nuclear weapons. And he even talks about the possibility of an agreement in the short term, but in the same breath on missiles that he does not compromise on them, saying explicitly, let's not talk about impossible things. From Israel's perspective, this is a dangerous vulnerability point. There is a clear fear of a scenario in which President Trump focuses only on the nuclear issue and leaves the threat of ballistic missiles untreated. This is defined by the sources in Jerusalem as a very, very bad scenario. And here in Israel enters the equation not as the one leading the move, but as the one that could observe the blowback. There have already been limited security discussions with the participation of the defense minister, the chief of staff, and the head of the Mossad dealing with Iran. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir held strategic coordination meetings in Washington recently, sitting down with senior Pentagon officials and with the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, General Dan Kane. And according to reports, the Americans did not provide an expected strike date and did not detail how they would act, but it was agreed that coordination would be maintained. This is not a ceremonial meeting. This is a preparatory meeting, both for attacks and also for defense. And meanwhile, the Israeli Air Forces is refreshing plans with clear goals, if necessary, to recreate air superiority over Iran's skies, like the one achieved in Operation Rising Lion. There is also a technical data point that comes up. Since the 12-day war, the Iranians have moved missile batteries from the east of the country to the west and are looking to produce new batteries. This is an Iranian operational adjustment intended to make another penetration by Israel's Air Force more difficult. And in parallel to all of this, Iran has opened another front against Europe, summoning the ambassadors of European Union countries in Tehran in protest over the declaration of the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. In Tehran, they say that they have formulated options and that in the coming days a decision will be made on response steps. This too is part of the pressure to show that the system is not weakening politically despite sanctions and despite isolation. And here comes the arena that most influences Trump's, the Gulf states. They are applying heavy pressure because they understand that if the United States strikes, Iran can choose to respond not only against American targets, but also against their own territory. And according to reports, Tehran has threatened to do this, the same very thing, without warning and without mercy. And therefore, for some of these countries, diplomacy does not come from love for Iran, but out of fear of Iran. And on the other hand, there are also behind-the-scenes voices in the Gulf that say that the opposite is what's happening. If President Trump does not carry out the threat, the Ayatollah regime will only grow stronger. However, the region is also split between a desire to see the regime worn down and fear of an escalation that will spin out of control. There is one truth that connects everything, that everybody is already in position, ready for the next move. The Americans have deployed their aircraft carriers and destroyers and the defensive systems arriving at bases, and with an envoy on its way to Israel. The Iranians have made their explicit threats against every American in this region, with a message to the Gulf states about our response without warning, and with a claim that they are doubling production and restoring launchers. The Israelis are in coordination in Washington with security discussions in Jerusalem and refreshing plans in the Air Force. But now comes the part that Iran does not want you to hear about, while it makes threats at the same time, and that is what's happening inside the country of Iran. So according to reports in Israel, the Iranian regime continues a wave of executions and the suppression of the protesters, with harsh numbers that are presented as a continuation of a trend. There are also descriptions of widespread arrests and fear that whoever goes out into the streets will not return. And all of this is happening while the regime broadcasts outward firm resilience and looks for an external enemy to unite the public by force. But if this standoff ends in an agreement, it will be tested on one question. Does it stop only the nuclear issue, or also the missiles? And if this ends in an attack, it will be tested on another question. Will the defense envelope in the Middle East stand against a response that will not be measured? And how long will it take to defend the Islamic Republic of Iran? Finally, as the Gaza front shifts towards phase B of the deal, the next question is, what does it look like on the ground? What are the chances for an arrangement? And what does Israel demand in order to close the chapter without leaving a door open for the next round between Hamas and us? We'll bring you some answers to these very pressing issues. But first, I want to invite you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And make sure to look for Yair, Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms if you want to receive updates throughout the day. The best thing you can do is hit the subscribe button of TBN Israel on YouTube so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, speaking of what's happening on the ground, as the new year begins, I want to invite you to take part in something real, something rooted in the land and in the heart. I'm talking about the Rebuild Israel campaign. It's back, and this time we are planting life. In honor of Tu B'Shvat, we're establishing an apple orchard in Israel's northern border region. This land has seen fear, destruction, and displacement. Now it's time to bring life back, tree by tree. This orchard isn't just about agriculture. It's about restoration. It's about providing jobs, reviving communities, and showing the people of Israel that they are not alone. When you donate, you're not just giving, you are planting. Your support puts trees in the ground, real roots, real fruit, real impact. We're turning a place marked by war into a place that grows again. This is your opportunity to take part in the physical and spiritual renewal of the land of Israel. So go now to tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael, or call 800-804-7895. 800-804-7895. Plant a tree, renew the land, bless the future. The ceasefire in Gaza is now moving from phase A to phase B, and this time it's not just another round of talks. It's a test of strength, a test of governance, and a test of demilitarization. After the search and identification operation that ended with the return of Master Sergeant Ran Gaveli for burial in Israel, Israel is saying clearly there are no more hostages in the Gaza Strip. That closed phase A of this agreement, and now, with the same heavy charged endpoint, phase B begins, a phase that is supposed to lead to the end of the war and the replacement of the order in Gaza. But behind the scenes, Hamas is not disappearing. It is doing what it did throughout the war, dragging out time, applying pressure, and trying to gain more breathing room, even under a ceasefire. Israel's demand for Phase B is clear: the disarmament of Hamas and the transfer of control of the Gaza Strip to another body, not an upgrade, not a rebranding, and not partial disarmament. In Israel, they are talking about the main fear, fake disarmament, a scenario in which Hamas hands over heavy weapons or visible means, but keeps under the radar the dangerous core, small arms, underground infrastructure, command and control capabilities, and operatives underground who control the street. This is where American pressure comes in. In Jerusalem, they are waiting for a detailed American document that is supposed to determine what Phase B will look like in practice. Steps, mechanisms, and timelines. The goal? Not more general principles, but an operational work plan that both sides are supposed to accept. And within that, a clear deadline for Hamas disarmament is also supposed to arrive. A defined time window at the end of which there will be a decision, either full disarmament and a move to reconstruction and a civilian arrangement, or a return to fighting. And in the meantime, on the ground, the first day of Phase B gets one image that says it all. The Rafah crossing is reopening. This is a crossing that the IDF seized during the war, closed and effectively neutralized in order to block the weapons smuggling of Hamas, the arms, the equipment, and everything they need for terror infrastructure and goods that move without oversight. Now, the compound has been restored. The rubble has been cleared, and on the Gazan side, passport inspection rooms have been rebuilt ahead of the crossing. The new model works like this. There is no physical presence of IDF soldiers inside the terminal. Israeli oversight is from a distance, with a position that has no soldiers at the crossing itself, and security checks that take place in stages. Anyone who exits or enters first goes through inspections and identification by local elements and international monitors, and then reaches an additional screening layer that is operated in an area under the IDF's control. The goal is one, to verify identity and to prevent the movement of terror operatives disguised as civilian traffic. The volume of the movement is limited. This is movement of people only, with daily quotes, and not a full border opening and not a return to normal. This is a measured pilot, meant to allow basic movement, but keep the risk under control. In parallel to the crossing, the question of the day after in Gaza is also supposed to begin. On paper, they are talking about a technocratic management committee that will handle civilian logistical issues, but on the ground, the picture is complex. There are reports of a committee that is operating without a permanent headquarters, without institutional infrastructures, and at this stage also without clear operational badges. Part of its work, according to the assessments, is being carried out outside the Gaza Strip altogether, mainly to Egypt, and this is exactly where Hamas is trying to drive a wedge, not through a declaration, but through a method. There are claims that in meetings held in Cairo, concerns were raised that Hamas will try to continue controlling things behind the scenes, placing activists from the military wing into civilian services and other roles, demanding influence over finance and security files, and creating a situation where even if the sign on the door says Management Committee, the force that dictates in practice will be the same armed power. And at the same time, inside the Gaza Strip, Hamas is also feeling internal pressure. There are reports of violent clashes between Hamas members and armed clans in Khan Yunis, in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. According to those reports, one local militia claimed it eliminated a Hamas terrorist and also captured 6 more, including a figure identified with the Dawah network. For Hamas, this is a troubling event, not only because of the blow, but because of the signal: erosion of fear, erosion of governance, and an internal power that is struggling against Hamas amongst the Palestinian people. But anyone who looks only at the cracks misses the second part. Hamas is still trying to reorganize. In the Strip, there are reports about the establishment of a new Hamas framework of around 500 operatives, a force whose goal is to preserve control, apply pressure on the population, and bring armed presence back to the streets precisely during a period when everyone is talking about disarmament. This is exactly the gap between documents and policy, and those holding weapons on the ground. And from here, we return to the Israeli side. The IDF is not waiting to see how this develops. Even during the agreement period, the IDF enforces. And in recent days, we have seen a wave of focused strikes in the Gaza Strip. This is in response to what is defined as violations, attempts to approach, and suspicious movements in buffer zone areas. In the Rafah area, according to reports, is an unusual incident that took place. Terrorists emerged from an underground infrastructure, and a rapid airstrike was carried out, during which several of them were eliminated. In other incidents, strikes were reported in Gaza City, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, and damage to Hamas infrastructure took place. The message here is simple. The ceasefire does not turn an area into a free zone. Anyone who raises an armed head goes into the crosshairs. And if we're talking about the day after, we also need to talk about the players that are trying to come in. So in recent weeks, advanced contacts have been taking place between Israel, between the United States and the United Arab Emirates around the idea that the Emiratis would take part of the civilian logistical management of the Gaza Strip. And according to the scenarios that are being discussed, this involves managing commerce, markets, and a logistical framework, including external security arrangements and a mechanism that will allow goods to enter under supervision and control, with an attempt to block Hamas from money and from control. It's an idea that speaks economy and management, but on the ground, it touches one question: who holds power? Because in Gaza, without power, there is no rule. And Hamas has one supreme interest: not to lose it. And that is why Phase B is not a closing chapter. It is a chapter of decision. The reopening of the Rafah border crossing is only the first sign, and the American document, the timelines for disarmament, the international mechanism, and the ability to establish a real civilian body that will not be swallowed by Hamas, all of these will determine whether we are on the way to an agreement or an arrangement or to another fight. Israel entered this phase on a high alert, because if Hamas tries to slip under the radar, it will not allow that to take hold. And the big question now is how quickly we reach a test point where someone will have to decide: dismantle the weapons or face the price. And while Gaza enters the Phase B of this deal, on the edge, the regional clock keeps ticking. And we'll bring you what's happening just now in Syria. But before that, make sure to hit that subscribe button, look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on social media, only follow official accounts of TBN Israel. So let's talk about what's happening in Damascus, because it's back in the headlines again. Not because of Iran, but because of what is happening inside Syria itself. Rockets are fired towards the El Mazeh neighborhood and towards the military airport in that area. And the Syrian Interior Ministry claims that it is not stray fire. This is a terrorist cell. According to the official statements, security forces arrested 2 suspects responsible for this fire. It is claimed that they are connected to foreign entities, and that the weapons, rockets, and also drones came from the Lebanese Hezbollah terrorist organization. In Syria, they say the cell had already planned additional attacks, and the arrest closed the circle before execution. Hezbollah immediately denied it. We have no activities in Syria. We have no presence there. And what is bubbling here runs deeper. Over the past week, growing instability has been felt around the capital. Rumors, shooting incidents, and friction between local forces as the El Shara tries to establish control in the background, but there are areas that look like a security vacuum. Into that vacuum come sleeping cells, smuggling, and weapons changing hands. And here comes the connection to the IDF. For Israel, every shot towards Damascus and every drone found in the field is also a warning sign to the north, because that same smuggling route from Syria to Lebanon is the access that feeds Hezbollah. Therefore, the IDF continues to operate in southern Lebanon and also in southern Syria against the weapons depots, the infrastructure, and the suspects to prevent entrenchment and approach to the fence of the Golan Heights. So Syria is destabilizing while the entire region is on a high alert against Iran. The question now is simple: who will fill the vacuum there? And how many fronts will Israel have to prepare for at the same time? We're not new to this, but we know that we need to pray for the people of Israel and, above all, for the God of Israel to protect us. So let's unite in prayer for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders. Let's pray for the IDF soldiers that are defending us on multiple fronts. Let's pray for provision to the people of Israel. Let's pray for wisdom to our team at TBN Israel here. Let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you so much for your support, your help, above all, your prayers.